Jacinta Marto lived in Fatima, Portugal. She was born on March 11, 1910, and she and her brother Francisco, ages 7 and 9, were two of the three visionaries who saw Our Lady. Jacinta especially loved her older cousin Lucia, who was 10 years old at the time of the visions, and she wanted to spend as much time with her as she could. For that reason, she begged her parents to allow her to watch over the sheep with Lucia and Francisco. Her parents relented and even gave her a few sheep of her own to watch over. So they would spend their days in the pasture, packing a small lunch, to play, say their daily rosary, and dance, while Francisco played his flute. One day, while watching the sheep, they were playing jacks, when suddenly a strong wind came out of nowhere. There, before them, was a beautiful angel. Lucia writes in her memoir, "There above the trees, toward the east, we began to see a light, whiter than snow. It was the form of a young man, transparent, more brilliant than crystal when pierced by the rays of the sun. We were so surprised, we uttered not a word. He came near us and said, 'Fear not, I am the angel of peace. Pray with me.' The angel bowed low and prayed what we know today as the Fatima prayer. My God, I believe, I adore, I hope, and I love you. I beg pardon for those who do not believe, do not hope, and do not love you." The second time the angel appeared, he again entreated the children to pray and to make sacrifices. This time, Jacinta and Lucia felt overcome with mental and physical fatigue, so much that they couldn't even talk about it with Francisco, who could only see the angel but not hear him. About a month later, the angel appeared a third time. This time, he gave them Holy Communion. On May 13th, Our Lady appeared to the children for the first time. Here, Our Lady told them her reason for coming, that she wished to see the children on the 13th of each month for 6 months, and that she would explain more in her next visit. When Our Lady left and the girls told Francisco everything Our Lady told them, they decided they must keep the heavenly visit a secret. Lucia was doubtful that Jacinta could keep such a secret, but Jacinta promised, "Honest, I won't tell anyone." However, as such a big secret for anyone, it was too much to contain for 7-year-old Jacinta, and the secret was out. As soon as she saw her mother, Jacinta ran to her and said, "I saw Our Lady in the cova." Naturally, her parents didn't believe her and laughed it off, but their brothers and sisters ran over to Lucia's house, who lived nearby, and questioned her if what Jacinta said was true. Reluctant but not wanting to lie, Lucia admitted that it was true and repeated all that Our Lady said. Lucia's mother was much more upset than Francisco and Jacinta's mother had been, and was very disturbed that they were going around telling such a story. Lucia was upset by her mother, Jacinta was upset that she had told the secret, and Francisco was upset because everyone else was upset. Thus, the prediction of Our Lady, warning the children that they would have much to suffer, was coming true. Although the children had much to suffer from their families, they tried to make sacrifices of their own choosing. They started off by giving their lunch to the sheep, and instead eating acorns, roots of bellflowers, and mushrooms. Later, they decided it would be more pleasing to Our Lady to give their lunch to the poor children instead of the sheep. As days went by, word that the children had seen Our Lady spread, making gossip reach Lucia's mother's ears. She brought Lucia to the parish priest, hoping that his authority would make Lucia confess that the visions were only a lie. She said to her, "Tell the priest that you lied so that on Sunday he can say in church that it was a lie and put an end to this whole thing." But of course, Lucia couldn't do such a thing. On Our Lady's second visit, the children learned of God's great outrage at the sins of the world and the need for reparation. They also learned that Jacinta and Francisco would go to heaven soon, but that Lucia would stay on earth for a long while. On Our Lady's third visit, she showed them hell. This vision made a big impression on the children, especially Jacinta. While Francisco's concern was to console the heart of our Lord, Jacinta's was to save sinners. She was constantly looking for a way to make sacrifices to save sinners from hell. One day that was particularly hot, the children were very thirsty. Lucia ran to a nearby neighbor's house to get some water, But when she offered it to Francisco, he shook his head, saying he wanted to suffer for sinners. Jacinta said the same. I also want to offer a sacrifice. So Lucia poured the water into the hollow of a rock for the sheep. As the day wore on, the heat and the lack of water began to give Jacinta a headache, and the frogs and insects began to get on her nerves. She complained to Lucia, "My head aches. Tell the crickets and the frogs to stop." "Don't you want to suffer for sinners?" Lucia asked. "Yes, I do," Jacinta said. "Let them sing." Another time, as they passed by a pond, Jacinta was overcome with thirst and was tempted to drink from it. It was dirty pond water which the animals drank from, and Lucia tried to persuade Jacinta not to drink it, but Jacinta said, "I'll drink this and offer the Lord the sacrifice of drinking this foul water instead of my thirst." With each visit of Our Lady, the children were inspired more and more to suffer for sinners, and in between the visits, they found endless ways to mortify themselves. Many times it was simply depriving themselves of a treat when it was offered, like grapes. Instead of eating them, they would give it to the poor children instead. Another time, their mother gave them figs to share, but Jacinta ran off so she wouldn't be tempted to eat them. One day, Lucia found a piece of rope. She cut it into 3 pieces, and the children wrapped the rope tightly around their waists. They even wore the ropes to bed, which disrupted their sleep. On the 13th of September, Our Lady visited the children again. After Lucia asked her usual question of what Our Lady wanted from them, Our Lady told them to tell the people to continue to say the rosary to end the war. She also added, "God is pleased with your sacrifices, but does not want you to sleep with a rope. Wear it only during the day." The children then asked Our Lady if she would perform a miracle so that all would believe, and Our Lady said, "Yes, in October I will perform a miracle so that all will believe." News spread quickly that a miracle was promised to happen in October, and people came from miles away to see it. The promised miracle, known today as the Miracle of the Sun, occurred on October 13th, and over 70,000 people witnessed it. Many were converted, and some were even healed. After the visions ended, people continued to come to Fatima, seeking out the children for prayers or just to see them. Most of the time, the children would hide, but if they weren't able to run away before being spotted, they were forced to put up with the people and the endless questions and conversations. One woman threw herself on her knees before Jacinta, crying and begging her to obtain a cure from Our Lady from an infirmary. Jacinta, uncomfortable with her kneeling before her, tried to make the woman stand, but unable to do so, she knelt down with the woman instead and prayed for her. Later, the woman returned to the cova to tell the children and everyone that she had been cured. Another time, a soldier came in tears, asking the children to please pray because he had been called to war, and he had a wife who was sick and 3 young children at home. "Don't cry," Jacinta told him. "Our Lord is so good." They prayed for the soldier and added an extra Hail Mary for him at the end of their rosaries. After a few months, the soldier came back along with his wife and children. They all looked very happy. They told the children that on the eve of his departure, he had been stricken with a sudden fever and had been sent home on an unlimited furlough. At the same time, his wife was cured. Another time after the apparitions, one of Lucia's aunt had an urgent prayer request for her. Lucia was away at the time, so the prayer petition was passed on to Jacinta. Her aunt had a son who had left home and wasn't heard from for a long time, and everyone was very worried about him. Jacinta prayed for her cousin, and after a few days, he came home late one night. He explained to his parents that he had gotten lost in the mountain and woods, and a violent storm came up, making it even harder to find his way. He fell on his knees and petitioned God's help and mercy when he suddenly saw Jacinta standing next to him. She gave him her hand and led him to a road after pointing in the direction to go. When this was brought up to Jacinta, she was as surprised and mystified as everyone else. "I don't even know where those forests or those mountains are, but I prayed hard to Our Lady for him because of Aunt Victoria's sorrow." Soon Francisco fell victim to the Spanish flu, as did Jacinta only a few days later. The entire family had it, except for their father. Lucia, who came to visit Jacinta, found Jacinta elated because Our Lady had visited her. She said, "Lucia, Our Lady came to see me and she said that she's coming very soon to take Francisco to heaven." Then she asked me if I still wanted to convert more sinners, and I said yes. She went on saying that Our Lady told Jacinta that she would go to 2 different hospitals before she died, not to be cured, but to suffer for sinners. She also told Jacinta that she would stay there alone. During their illness, Jacinta would spend much of her time visiting with Francisco in his room until she was forbidden to leave her bed. This was very hard for her, but she offered her desire to see Francisco as a sacrifice for sinners. She told Lucia, "Oh, how I would love to be able to go again to the hills to say the rosary in the cave, but I can't anymore. When you go to the cova, Lucia, pray for me. I'm sure I'll never go there again. Now you go to Francisco's room, because I want to make the sacrifice of being alone." When Francisco died, Jacinta offered up her sadness as a sacrifice for sinners as well. Even though she knew she would see him soon, she missed him terribly. She said once to Lucia, "I'm thinking of Francisco, how much I would love to see him." Sometimes sacrifices presented themselves without Jacinta having to look for them. Village women would come to visit Jacinta and sit in her room for hours, bringing their knitting with them and asking Jacinta many questions about Our Lady. Poor Jacinta, unable to escape this time and unable to rest, offered this up as well for sinners. "My head aches from hearing those people. Now I can't run away or hide myself, so I have more sacrifices to offer our Lord." Jacinta's illness developed into pleurisy and an abscess formed on her side. It hurt her mother to see Jacinta in so much pain, but Jacinta would say, "Don't worry, Mother, for I'm going to heaven. I'll pray for you a lot there. Don't cry, I'm all right." It was now time for Jacinta to go to the first hospital. Jacinta knew she had to go, and she knew that she would not be cured. Although she was at peace with this, it still hurt her to leave Lucia. She told her, "Lucia, if only you could come with me. The hardest thing to me is to have to go without you. The hospital will probably be very dark where we can't see a thing, and I will have to suffer there all alone." As Jacinta predicted, she was alone during her time in the hospital, and she was lonely. She had a few visits from her mother and Lucia, and for that she was happy. But when they left, the loneliness returned. On top of that, she didn't make any improvement. In fact, her abscess in her side was worse than ever, so the doctor advised that she go home. A priest who had visited Jacinta when she first arrived home was shocked to find how much her appearance had changed. He writes, "She was all skin and bones, and it was a shock to see how thin her arms were. She was running a fever all the time. Pneumonia, then tuberculosis and pleurisy ate away at her strength. I remembered, as I saw her, that Our Lady had promised Bernadette of Lourdes that she would not be happy in this world, but the next. I wondered if Our Lady made the same promise to Jacinta." For the brief times when Jacinta's health did improve, she would ask her parents to let her go to daily Mass. Of course, this couldn't happen. Lucia tried to reason with her, saying, "Don't come to Mass, it is too much for you. Besides, today isn't Sunday." "That doesn't matter," Jacinta said. "I want to go in place of the sinners who don't go, even on Sundays." One sacrifice that Jacinta struggled with making was to drink the glass of milk her mother would bring in for her. "Drink this milk, Jacinta, it's good for you." But Jacinta pushed away the milk, and her mother walked out of the room saying to herself, "I don't know how I'm going to make her take anything." Lucia witnessed this and chided Jacinta. "How is it that you disobey your mother? Aren't you going to offer that sacrifice to our Lord?" Jacinta was immediately repentant and called her mother back. "I'll take anything you want me to take, Mother," she said, and she drank the milk without any fuss. Later, she said to Lucia, "If only you knew how hard it was for me to drink that." Later, when her mother brought in some grapes to munch on, Jacinta wanted to continue her sacrifice, so she refused the grapes and drank more milk. Around mid-January, Our Lady came again to see Jacinta and told her that she would be going to the second hospital soon, and that there she would die alone. Before leaving for the hospital in Lisbon, Jacinta was allowed to visit the cova one last time. After praying there for a while, she got up and remarked, "When Our Lady went away, she passed over those trees and entered heaven so fast that it seemed her feet were caught in the door." Saying goodbye to Lucia was the hardest sacrifice of all. Lucia writes, "She kept her arms around me for a long time. She was crying and saying to me, 'Never again shall we see each other. Pray a great deal for me, for I'm going to heaven. There I will pray for you. Don't ever tell anyone the secret, even if they kill you. Love Jesus a great deal in the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Make many sacrifices for sinners.'" Once they arrived in Lisbon, a place had been arranged for Jacinta to stay while she waited to be admitted to the hospital. However, the woman who was supposed to take her in saw Jacinta all sickly in skin and bones and refused to take her in. But God had other plans. A nun in Lisbon, Mother Maria, heard that the little visionary was in town with nowhere to stay and immediately offered a room for Jacinta. The good mother ran an orphanage and had heard all about Fatima and was eager to accommodate. Jacinta was very happy with this arrangement because not only did she have the privacy of her own room, she was right across the hall from the chapel. Jacinta was overjoyed to share a house with Jesus, and on days when she was feeling well enough, she would sit on the balcony that opened to the chapel where she communed with Jesus. Mother Maria was very friendly and motherly, which made the parting from her own mother much easier, and she and Jacinta would have some very down-to-earth talks. Her mature remarks impressed Mother Maria so much that she had to ask Jacinta how she learned these things. "Our Lady taught me," Jacinta replied, "but some things I think out for myself. I like to think very much." Upon one of their discussions, Jacinta revealed to her, "My dear mother, the sins that bring most souls to hell are the sins of the flesh. Certain fashions are going to be introduced, which will offend our Lord very much. Those who serve God should not follow these fashions. The Church has no fashions. Our Lord is always the same." And as if looking into the future, she said, "Many marriages are not good. They do not please our Lord and are not of God." Mother Maria also discovered to her joy that Jacinta still had occasional visits from Our Lady, as Jacinta politely asked her to move over a bit on the bed. "Mother dear, I am expecting Our Lady." Jacinta stayed with Mother Maria in her private room for a few weeks before entering the hospital. Mother Maria came to visit Jacinta often, but it was still hard for Jacinta to go from her private room with a balcony that overlooked the beautiful garden and the chapel just down the hall to the bland, cold walls of the hospital. The doctors wanted to do an operation on Jacinta. She told the doctors that it would be useless, but she also knew it was an opportunity to offer up some suffering. She was operated on without gas, and the numbing medication did very little to dull the pain. 2 ribs were taken out, and the doctors were hopeful. However, Jacinta said, "I'm not complaining anymore. Our Lady appeared to me and said that she is coming for me soon. She took all my pains away." On February 20th, 1920, Jacinta requested the last rites of the Church. A priest came to hear her confession, but decided to wait to give her communion until the next morning. Jacinta warned him it would be too late, and she was right, because she passed away and alone at 10:30 that same evening. The news of Jacinta's death spread, and people flocked to see her body. Soon, they were forced to take the body to a special room where only a few visitors at a time were allowed to view it. 15 years later, Jacinta's body was transferred to the cemetery of Fatima to be placed in the same tomb of her brother Francisco. When her casket was opened, her body was found to be whole and incorrupt, her face looking like that of a sleeping child.